Well, I think what happens is when you don't realize that you're poor until you're about, well, I don't know about nowadays, but back then I didn't realize I was poor until I was in about the 7th grade, when things started to matter, when kids were wearing Nikes and I was wearing Tracks.
Designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and our esteemed guest today is Tony Ayon from Miramar International in Bakersfield, California. Say what's up, Tony.
What's up, Tony? I mean, what's up, Kyle? I follow directions for that.
I love it, man. You're too much. So Tony and I love to joke around, and just a quick intro to how I got to know Tony. Tony and I have met in person. I was in Bakersfield a few weeks ago doing a keynote speech for a YPN Lunch and Learn. Their wonderful association of realtors introduced me. I was introduced to Bakersfield Association of Realtors in 2017 from Derek Sprague, a good buddy of mine, and they invited me back out to do a keynote speech. That's going to be a podcast episode here in a few weeks. But before we get too far into that, Tony and I bumped into each other into the men's room, and I was I did the
easy.
In a good way. I did. I was driving up from LA, fighting traffic to get up there on time for the Lunch and Learn, and I had just my collared shirt on without my tie. And I'm sitting there with 3 different ties, 2 are blue and 1 is red. And I'm kind of like looking there. I'm like, what looks good? What feels right? And Tony just goes, hey man. And I'm just standing at the sink and he's getting ready to leave. He's like, go with red. And I'm like, really? Cause I had blue on my collar and I felt like that was going to be a really the right color. And he's like, yeah, man, you know what? You're in Bakersfield. It's conservative here. Go with red. And I was like, you know what? I'm going with it. I don't know this guy, but he's probably right. And it's become a kinship just in a couple of seconds. We then talked for a couple of minutes after the presentation, and I find that Tony operates a big time boutique real estate brokerage firm in Bakersfield, California that not a lot of people will know about, but I promise this will be one of many opportunities to get Miramar International on the map. So before we get into the size of your company, Tony, let's talk about the beginning. You grew up in kind of a humble setting, humble beginnings. And you talked about how you grew up in Mexico and made it here to the States. Let's unpack that a little bit and just talk about your start.
Yeah, so I kind of didn't grow up in Mexico. I was born there, and as a young kid, came to the United States and had the opportunity to do that. But growing up, my parents were laborers, and so my father gave up a music career, when he lived in Mexico. My mom was a housewife at the time. Decided, to look for better opportunities for their children, and there's 9 of us, so there's 5 boys and 4 girls. So it's like the traditional or the way that people think about Mexican families, or we're large. And actually, there's like some kind of, if you think about it, a little bit of a reason for that. The older kids kind of take care of the younger kids, and it kind of all works out. But anyway, we grew up in a small town called Shafter, and Shafter's probably about 20 minutes north of Bakersfield. Bakersfield being about an hour and a half north of Los Angeles, so one of the largest cities in the world. But grew up in a farming community at the beginning. We lived in a labor camp when we first moved to the United States. In a labor camp, basically it was like a 400 square foot little tiny room, basically is what it was, and it was all communal bathrooms, so everybody used the same bathrooms. It was like a horseshoe type, if you can imagine, situation where all these little bungalows that, So one day my parents get a notice from the landlord, and mind you, this was in the 78, so, the rules and regulations of housing have changed quite a bit, but they still, the owner comes and says, hey, you guys got to move because there's too many of you guys in a 400 square foot unit. And if you can imagine, a 400 square foot unit's about the size of a 2-car garage. It's about 400 square feet. Realtors, you guys should know that, by the way. And so, so we get evicted. And, as a kid, we don't know what's going on. But, we got long story short, we got an opportunity. I gentleman did a seller carryback. My parents were able to buy a house, you know, because of what happened through some friends and grandfather that knew somebody that, anyway, we were able to buy a house. So I remember walking into this house, and just this mansion. I walked in, and I was like, wow, man. Walked in, there's a living room, there's a kitchen, a dining area, a bathroom, 3 bedrooms, we had our own yard and everything. It was gigantic, which, by the way, I still own that home, and it's 990 square feet. So so obviously it was a mansion. So, you know, grew up and took advantage of some education and was able to go to Cal State Bakersfield. And so I was able to, you know, go through the motions of that. And then, but, you know, that's kind of where I started, you know.
So wait a second. For those of you that may have missed that, so you doubled your square footage, first of all, when going into this new house that your parents bought with a seller carryback. You had told me that this labor camp, which I'm assuming there's a lot of laborers living there and they're just trying to find a way to acclimate themselves in America. And you've got a big family. I come, by the way, from a family of 6 kids. So there's 8 of us living in the house. And I know exactly what you mean. The older kids take care of the younger kids, and, you know, mom and dad are doing what they can to make ends meet. And so you were telling me as we were prepping that you guys had a dirt floor, and that you've got that communal bathroom, and there's 11 of you living in this 400 square feet. So yeah, going from 400 to almost 900 square feet seems like a big upgrade. And man, you didn't tell me. You surprised me there that you still own that house. That is so cool.
Yeah, that's my father passed about 10 years ago, but my mom is still there, and I was able to keep the home. They actually, you know, they figured I was a son that kind of knew what the hell he was doing, or the heck he was doing. And so they just said, we're going to go ahead and let you take care of that. But, you know, it's, you know, you don't realize it until now, you know, that I walked into a mansion, which now I walk in and we can't even fit. It's like, man, how did we all live here even at the time? Yeah, for some reason, we always had company. We always had other cousins and other people always staying with us. And I never understood that. But, you know, you grow up, you know, as Mexicans, we have a culture and we're very, you know, dedicated to our families and stuff. Yes, there's some other things and other issues that, you know, that are good, bad, and whatever, but we all have them in our cultures as you all well know. You know, not everybody's perfect and not anybody's culture is perfect, but we do have the opportunity to, you know, work with each other when it comes to that stuff. But my family is huge, and we have a ton of nieces and nephews, and my mom still, you know, she still kind of runs the family and stuff. So it's still a good thing.
That is really cool. Well, humble beginnings, I think, for a lot of successful entrepreneurs, whether in real estate or in any other industry, it tend to be one of the things that you see as a very common thread, where someone came up from what a lot of people would say, like, man, you had some pretty dire circumstances, and to be able to make it in the way that you have. So I know you've done some stints at other real estate firms, Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, and we'll talk about that. But let's talk about Miramar. For those that don't know Miramar International, what is the size of your company in Bakersfield, California?
So in Bakersfield, there's I think 300 brokerages in Bakersfield, Kern County, you know, in the whole county. And we're kind of, you know, the bigger board is us, Bakersfield Association, because the biggest city kind of, I believe there's about almost 400,000 people in the actual city. And then just kind of, it's kind of a mixture of the city with some county, but it's all kind of stuck together. So you wouldn't know where the city starts and the county ends, when the vice versa. So there's about, I'm gonna say about close to 450,000 in just the population. And we're, you know, we're number one. We, you know, we have about 20% of the agents work for Miramar, which is a little over 400 agents that work here. We control 20% of the market at Miramar. So every 5th house, 1 out of 5 houses is sold by or bought or sold by a Miramar agent. Last year we did 3,025 transactions for almost 800, a little over $800 million in volume. So yeah, we've done a lot of work, and it's all, you know, just, it's not a franchise. It's just local people here, just two owners, myself and a gentleman by the name of Dan Schoenfeld. And he and I put this thing together, and he has an MBA, so he's really smart and stuff. But you know, well, I won't hold it against him. But I'm more, But we have a great, working relationship. It kind of works out because we each know what our strengths and weaknesses are, and we kind of help each other and push each other to be better and be the best. We knew that this was going to work when we first started in 2011. So we're a very young company. We just started this in 2011. But we didn't really think that it was going to blow up as crazy as it is now. We knew we were going to be large and probably be number one, but didn't think it was going to be so quick. I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, by the third year, we were already number two, and then the fourth, we were number one. So, and we took out, these companies that have been here for ages and generations of, grandfather was, a broker, and then father, and then now a son, and Coldwell Banker was, the reigning king for 20 years. And then all of a sudden we just put, put a little dent into their business and stuff like that. But we all get along here, now. There was some trial and tribulations that we went through at the beginning when we first started. Obviously, these other companies that have been here for ages didn't really like what was happening. But at the end of the day, it's an agent-centric company. It's about the agents. I work for the agents. Agents don't work for me. The agents are my clients, and they're the ones that I take care of. They take care of me. If they're successful and I help them become successful, then I'm successful. So this company's ran about with the agents in mind and putting them first before the brokerage. And I think that's why it works.
Man, I love that. There's so much in that answer. The start, I think, is really important for a lot of people to think about, because most would say, okay, over 400 agents in Bakersfield. And by the way, a lot of our audience, I will guarantee you, has no idea where Bakersfield is. I do, because I've been there. And like you mentioned, as we began, Bakersfield is just north of LA. And it's, depending on traffic, 1.5 to 2 hours. And I'll tell you, it's a much, much bigger city. And I'm calling it a city intentionally than a lot of people probably think or know about. You figure it's kind of agricultural, rural, there's more probably industry than I'm just commenting on there, but you're not sure what to expect as you're driving through these canyons and beautiful mountain ranges on the way into Bakersfield. And you are doing what you can. You're no longer the new business on the block. You're not the newcomer. You've actually, like you said, toppled a lot of these bigger brokerages in the area. And I would imagine, having had some experiences in some smaller communities, and 450,000 people is not a small community necessarily, but it probably feels more like a small community on certain days. That was probably, you were probably shaking a lot of things up, and there's a lot of people that were probably like, they can't do it, or they're crazy, or why do people go there? And then all of a sudden you're starting to get a lot of momentum. So what were some of the early things that you and your group did where you feel like were some of those things that really just kind of propelled your momentum, without sharing any trade secrets or anything? I don't want to get into that, but what were some of those early victories that you felt like, man, we're going to make it? This is like, we are getting some really positive momentum here.
Well, I think it was at the beginning, it's trying to get people to buy into what we're doing. And it's basically just getting them to understand that, it's not back in the day when I first started, because I've been doing real estate for almost 20 years now, it was still kind of, if somebody wanted to buy a house, they would drive into Bakersfield and they would go find a brokerage, or they open up, a phone book. If, for those that don't know what it is, a book with phone numbers in it. And so real estate companies would advertise in them. And so people would come into town, grab a phone book somewhere from a payphone. If you don't know what those are either, they're vintage. They're stuck on walls, and you have to hold this thing to your ear.
I was in an airport yesterday, literally in an airport, and I took a photo of a payphone because it was the one payphone sitting on the wall so I could show my kids. So there are people who have not seen a payphone, I'm sure.
And so, the days of that where you needed a broker to, give you a place for you to work and charge you some crazy commissions for that. I mean, those days are gone. I mean, what is it? 85-90% of, people looking for properties are on the internet now. And so we built this model that, it's more like branding the agent, branding the person that's going to do the business, put your own phone number on your sign, because nobody knows better about that listing than you. So these agents have never heard of that. You have these, franchise companies that have their phone number, so that the person that's sitting there lazy, not wanting to work, waiting for the phone to ring so they can get a client while you're out there working and getting listings and hustling. To me, that didn't make sense, because at one time I worked for somebody that had that type of mentality and brokerage, and it's not their fault that they had it that way. It just had been like that for years, and nobody had ever come up and shook the trees and said there's a different way to do business. So when you develop a system where the agents get to keep a little bit more of their money, plus let them brand themselves, plus let them grow their own business, plus let them have a team, plus, and all these pluses that don't cost anything to us as a brokerage, because it really doesn't. It's just putting the systems in place so that they can succeed. And they're not going to leave the business. They're going to stay busy. And once again, it goes to, like I said, if you succeed, Kyle, working at Miramar, that means I succeed. My brokerage succeeds. We become, and the company becomes a better company, agent, brokerage. And so it's agent centric. It's all about the agent. It's not about the brokers. And if you came to my office, you would actually see I have, probably one of the smaller offices in the building. And my partner doesn't even have an office. He works from home. He doesn't care. He's like, we needed the space for our agents. That's what it's really about. And I think we took this city by storm because we really changed and the other thing was, the average age of a broker at the time when Miramar started, I was 38. And so the average broker at the time was, 60, 62, white male, so we made some changes. Like I was actually like the first male president of the Women's Council Realtors. Cool. I was always involved in all the, on the board and, ran committees and education committee and, a lot of different things. But it came back from before I got into real estate, where I was a drug and gang specialist for the housing authority. And I developed programs for the Boys and Girls Club, and Mercy Housing developed for low-income families. So I was able to take that knowledge and bring it and know that if you treat people with respect and you treat them right and you don't lie to them and always tell them the truth, you're going to be fine. They're going to trust you. And if they trust you, they will work for you. So, and there's some tons of things that I can tell you that I've done in my life, but we only got 10 hours into this interview. So.
All right. So one of the things that I planned for, but we didn't talk about as we were getting ready for this interview, is there's a book that I've read and I love it. It's called The Immigrant Edge. And you're raised by immigrant parents. You had mentioned yourself that you moved from Mexico. And so this book distills down that there are 7 traits of successful immigrants, and that there's a disproportionate amount of people that are successful entrepreneurs that happen to have immigrated into this country. And this is not a political discussion. The goal is not to kind of go into that way, but that there are lots of people that have made the economy great coming from different countries, and America's a melting pot and has been for a long time, coming from different countries looking for new life, looking for new opportunity. And so here are the 7. And what I want you to do is I want you to listen to them and then kind of pounce on the one where you're like, man, that's exactly what I'm all about here as you run your own business. So trait number 1 is a voracious openness to learn. Trait number 2, a do whatever it takes mindset. Trait number 3, a willingness to outwork others. Trait number 4, a heartfelt spirit of gratitude. Trait number 5, a boldness to invest. Trait number 6, a commitment to delay gratification. Trait number 7, an appreciation of where they came from. So of those, I'm sure several of those are like ding, ding, ding.
I think it's all of them. Maybe what was it? What's 3 and 4 again?
3 was a willingness to outwork others, and 4 is a heartfelt spirit of gratitude. So let's talk about both of those and your reflections on those.
And those are, that's what I'm saying. And those are the ones that are probably, they all encompass and they're all correct. Right. I can talk about every single point in my life, but I think what happens is when you don't realize that you're poor until you're about, well, I don't know about nowadays, but back then I didn't realize I was poor until I was in about the 7th grade, when things started to matter, when kids were wearing Nikes and I was wearing Tracks. There's a store here in California, which I don't think it exists, or I think up north that it's Safeway, which is in the Vons, I guess. And And I remember that there was an aisle in that store. And when my mom took us down that aisle, we knew we were going to get shoes or clothes. And this was in a grocery store. This was not in a, we didn't take us. And then all of a sudden Payless came, and then we had Payless shoes and stuff. But so now you're sitting there, we got 1 pair of shoes, 2 pairs of pants, and 3 shirts for the year. That was what we got every year for school when school started. So I would, you show up in this clothes and a lot of hand-me-downs, and by the time the year ends, your jeans are ripped and everything. It is what it is. But I didn't realize that we were poor until I was about 6th and 7th grade, when these kids were wearing Nikes and the Tigre shirts, and a lot of people won't remember what that is, won't even know what that is. But anyway, it was name brand stuff. So my parents were really cool because they let us work out in the fields. The labor laws were very different back then. They won't let you do that anymore. But, when you're, 12, 13 years old, you can work in the field. My parents were cool because all the money that we made, they let us keep. So I was able to I remember buying my first pair of 501 jeans, Levi's, and my own first pair of Nikes, and my first pair of the Tigre shirt. And that's it. But that's all I could afford because, I didn't work that much in the summer, but I still made a little bit of money. But it made me feel so good, and it made me feel equal, right? And that's the key. It's feeling equal. And so I think as I was getting older, and realized, the discrepancy, because the school that I grew up in had very wealthy people in it, kids that went to school there, and had very poor kids that went to school there. But because of my way of being and the way I was kind of popular, but it wasn't because I was a jock or because I was a straight A student. It was because that's who I was. I kind of got along with everybody. And so just kind of like the way I do now, and in my business, I'm the same way. I kind of get along with everybody. So I saw the discrepancies and stuff, and I always told myself I want to be rich. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be rich when I get older. I'm not rich now, by the way. I do okay, but I'm not rich. I'm rich in life, I'll tell you that, and friends and family. But it's hard because, it's hard on the youth and stuff, and seeing these people coming through. And so, but one of the things that I can tell you is I had a few teachers that I was growing up that really believed in me. And they also exposed me to the outside world, because I lived in this small town that was agricultural town. And so I always tell people, this town, like I said earlier, is called Shafter. And I always tell people, look, Shafter people marry Shafter people and have Shafter kids, and then they continue the cycle. So I was exposed to going to the beach and going camping and going to all these places that opened up my mind and my world. And so I wanted those things. So I knew somehow, some way I had to work for them. So in order to have that nice car, or nice house, or travel, I had to work. I had to figure it out. And I think that's what happened is I got into a business of real estate and was like, are you telling me that I can make more than a doctor and a lawyer, and all I need is not even a GED? You just got to be 18 years old. Yeah, at least in California, which I think they should change some of the laws, by the way, too, but that's a whole different story. But, if you work hard and you put it together and set up a good business model and plan, and that drive, right? That drive. Who's that guy? Oh, he's the broker of so-and-so. How did he get that? How do I become that guy? What do I need to do? Oh, well, you just got to be a broker. Oh, I can do that. Who's that guy? Well, he owns this. Oh, I can do that. And I think that was always my mentality of I can do that. And so there was nobody better, smarter, stronger than me. It was just, they just made a decision to do it. And so if he can do it, I can do it. And that's, I think, another thing that I work with my agents on is like, hey, be me, but have this mentor guy that's showing you how to create wealth and build wealth and invest and stuff. Like, if I had somebody like me helping me when I first started, who knows where I'd be now, because nobody ever did that. It just like sit down, make phone calls, and good luck. That's basically how it happened, But anyway, I went off on a bunch of different stuff. What else you got? Awesome. What else you got?
That is so awesome, man. I, as I listen to that, I agree with you. Willingness to outwork others and a heartfelt spirit of gratitude really go hand in hand. And I think that's why they're tied into each other. And being fair to you, we didn't talk about this, we didn't prep for it, but your answer was so heartfelt, which is in trait number 4. And it's because you really, I think when you get that, and good kudos to your parents for giving you the dignity to understand a hard day's work. And I love how you said that you were lucky that they let you work in the field. There's a lot of people who would look at that totally differently. And then there's also a lot of people that I would imagine in 7th grade and 8th grade, they're wearing all these name brands, and they probably didn't think it was a big deal at all. Like that was just kind of their minimum level of expectation. That's just what they got for being a part of a family. And for you, you're like, man, that's a brass ring. That's something that I'm going to strive for. That's something that's important to me, because I want to kind of be in, not like the in crowd, but I want to also make a statement here. And it is so amazing. You're right. Real estate has this ability to give us really the opportunity with a very low barrier to entry to having a phenomenal lifestyle and a phenomenal career. And I think it's so empowering that you're doing that now on a large level with all of your agents. And I think it's really, really cool. I have several clients that are immigrants, and their stories of how they got to America, their stories of overcoming adversity, their stories of building major businesses are really, really cool. And so this is a topic that I'm fascinated about. Now, I didn't tell you who the author was because I didn't want to tip. Some people know, but The Immigrant Edge was written by Brian Buffini. So Brian Buffini talks about coming from Ireland and what that was like. And he distills down. I mean, obviously he's been a real estate broker in California himself, and then has a big training and coaching company. But it's the subtitle to the book is How to Make It Big in America. And I think you're doing that, and it's really, really cool. So I want to go back to those teachers, because you started to talk about that. And I think this is really important to park on for a second. You may not remember word for word what they said, but I'm sure you remember how they made you feel. And those couple of teachers that believed in you, what was it that they kind of flipped the switch for you? Or what were some of the things that they helped you figure out a way to kind of get out of your smaller agricultural community and get to Bakersfield? And what did they do to really empower you?
Well, it was more the belief, right? Because, not to get into too much detail about my older brothers and sisters. So I'm 6 of 9. So that's why I have to be loud, and I gotta be funny, and I gotta be all these other things. But my older brothers and sisters kind of paved the way from the beginning. That wasn't, and I love my brothers and sisters, but not one of them graduated from high school. Not one of them. They got to high school but never did, and luckily after some years and stuff, a lot of them, everybody's doing really well. But I was the next person that came through the school system, and so, like I said, because of the small community, all the teachers know. Here's another one. We're very tough kids. I mean, we boxed when we were young, and wrestled and all that stuff for the high school and stuff. And so, and my brothers are track runners, and my sisters we were very athletic and things like that, but just could never cross that finish line of just graduating from high school. And so my teachers were, here's this guy that is from this family that has it, can make it. And they would tell me that. They would say, Tony, you just stick with it. There's something about you, and you're gonna make it. There's something, and that happened many times from elementary to junior high to high school, that there are these teachers that would say, there is something about you. Don't give up on your dreams. There's something about you. You're gonna make it. You're gonna do something with your life. And I think that belief in me, that they believed in me, and they kind of pushed me to do. And I did well in school, by the way. So I was able to take these trips, and I'll tell you a quick story. I got some award, I don't remember what it was, for my academics, and they sat me in front of this Kiwanis president, and he literally sat in front of me, and I had lunch with the Kiwanis club, and I got to sit in front of the president, old as dirt. This guy was old as dirt, but he calls the waitress over and says, hey, bring me my dessert. We hadn't even had a salad. We hadn't had anything yet. He just said, bring my dessert. So the waitress comes back and brings the dessert, and bring him his dessert also. So she puts the dessert in front of me, and I'm looking at him like, what is happening right now? I have no idea what's happening. So he's eating the dessert. So I asked him, I said, why are you eating your dessert first? He goes, you know what? He goes, I'm going to eat my dessert first because I'm going to have something good. I don't know what this meal is going to be about, but I know that right now I'm going to have something good. So whatever happens after that doesn't really matter. And I always remember that. I'm like, that's a great way to look at even life, right? I want these things, and let's live for now and work hard and have the things that we want. And then everything else we can kind of work around or massage it. But I already fulfilled something about me in my life. So, and I was 11, 12 years old when that happened. And that story, that always in my mind about, have a little bit of dessert and then work around all the rest of the stuff. It's going to work out for you. But at least you already have something, the taste of the good life, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And then you want more and more and more and more and more. So you work harder and harder, and you do things that you need to do to get you to where you want to be, set your goals and, achieve them.
I love that story. I haven't heard it for probably a decade, but I remember reading a book where the author was describing that, and I feel like it was Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker is, I think, the book that I was reading, but we didn't really talk about this much, but he commented that that's something that you should do as you're making your way up, like go to a couple of nice dinners and like have these little moments where you're as you're crawling your way up and as you're really working to achieve, and you might be paying off debt, or you might be, really hustling hard and working crazy hours. Give yourself these little gifts, not big blowouts every week or something like that. And I love that. I've never actually seen someone do that, but I've read about it, and to hear you talk about it now, this is some, 30, 35 years later, that it's still impacting you. Like you remember that. And what a cool experience for you to be like, yeah, man, that makes all the sense in the world. Like taste a little bit of the good life, the sweet stuff. And then everything else is going to be extra credit, right? I mean,
right.
You're going to have a wonderful meal. You're going to have wonderful experiences, whatever that is. So that's so cool. I love that.
And by the way, my wife and I were very big on Dave Ramsey. We're big Dave Ramsey fans.
My man, I love it.
That crash of 2008, that we, and I'll tell you an embarrassing story, but it's true, because you were talking about adversity, and we had tons of it in 2008. The crash happened. My wife is in law enforcement. I can't really, but she still does that. But anyway, so, we made, I made personally, GCI, $138,000 in 2008. And my wife had her salary, which was about 75, 80 at the time. And we were living paycheck to paycheck. And so everybody around me we went from 4,200 agents to like 800. Like everybody got out of the business because they couldn't afford it, because it wasn't like you just slept and made money, because that's what was happening before. People were flipping property. I mean, it was just the Wild Wild West. And I say this not because, it's, like I said, it's a little embarrassing because you never, people sometimes don't know these things about you. But my wife, through a friend, got into this whole thing with Dave Ramsey, and I fought it. I didn't want nothing to do with it because it just is stupid and doesn't make sense. He got me into it. I did the 13 classes, and I committed to her that we were going to do it, and we did it together. And we paid off all our debt. So we don't have credit card debt. We don't have car payments. We don't have any of that. So now, every office that I open I have the cash to do it. Everything that we do, if we can't afford it, we just don't. But here's a funny thing about it. The more money you make, the stingier you get. It's kind of weird how that works. At least, I don't know. I think it's because of the whole Dave Ramsey thing. But I'm just like, do we really need that? So look, that's why I shave my head, so I don't have to, get haircuts. I'm just kidding. But anyway, so we did do the whole Dave Ramsey thing. True believer. I give that book to my agents all the time. I go, read this book. If you truly want to invest, this is where you got to start. Because the last thing that I want you to do is invest while you still have debt. So you're not really making anything. You're kind of actually losing. Or nothing drives me crazier when they go, hey, I got this house that I live in, and it has $100,000 in equity. How about if I take it out to invest? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Read this book, and I'll tell you why. So we're big Dave Ramsey fans, Financial Freedom University kind of stuff. And it got us to a good place that we're doing really well. So
awesome.
That's something. If anything, read that book, take the classes, and live like no one else. You can live like no one else.
Love that. So Dave Ramsey and I have actually met a couple of times. I went to an event gosh, this is now 5 years ago, at his house. And that guy is the real deal. I mean, there's not a single chink in the armor. It is all authentic. And I will tell you what, he is a really, really cool person. And for those of you who've never heard of Dave Ramsey, the book Tony's talking about is called The Total Money Makeover. He's written several others.
Yeah.
My favorite business book is called Entree Leadership, which Dave Ramsey also wrote. And then he's got Smart Money, Smart Kids. He's got The Legacy Journey. I mean, there's so many different levels of financial education that he's written. And I was a coordinator for several of his classes. So I actually stood in front of a room and would talk to people that were dealing with it. And we have several of our staff members that we have provided the tuition to go to. The class is $100. I mean, it's not going to break the bank for a lot of people, but for some people look at it and say, hey man, I'm in debt. I'm having trouble with payments. How am I going to afford, a $100 class? And so it's one of those things where my deal with folks in our office is if they want to get on the straight and narrow with the class or with the book, I will pay for it, but they have to prove perfect attendance. And we're going to have a little bit of a interaction, a lunch, or kind of a recap after the class. So it's life-changing stuff. My wife and I did it. I don't operate with credit cards. There's no debt in the business, no SBA loans, nothing. So I love that. And I think I think that what you had mentioned that, you feel like you get stingier. I think that's wisdom. I think that what happens is, and Dave talks about this in the class, that no one uses paper dollar bills anymore. Everybody's a swipe of a card or whatever. Now you do, different Apple Pay and all this other stuff, Venmo. I mean, money flies around you and no one feels it. And so every month I get my walking around money, as my brother calls it, my wham, or my gas, entertainment and meals, my gem money. And I just put it in my pocket. It's a couple $100 because when you start to, dole out money for whatever it is, you feel it so much more when you're paying in cash. So it's a great class, great resource. All right. So we're nearing the end of our show. A couple of things that we like to always talk with our guests about are, and you mentioned some failures that have happened, but for you, and those failures, are financial things. Obviously a lot of people weren't planning on the Great Recession. They were hoping that wouldn't happen, and it did. We all got affected by it. But what are some of the lessons you've learned from things that don't go your way? And I think most importantly, it's not so much about, how you get knocked down. You're a boxer and a wrestler, like you said, but it's how quickly you can get back up. And so for you, what does failure mean? And then how do you impart that on your team, on your company, of like how to mentally work through things that don't go your way?
Well, at the end of the day, it's figuring out a way to not just sit there and continue to dwell on it. It's more about what happened, own it, and then it's the solution for it. And if the solution has something to do with reaching out for help or going to a class or getting out of it, whatever it is, marriage, and we do that. That happens a lot. People get divorced, and it's just a big old mess with that too. But it's own it, and then move on. And once you own it, I think it kind of takes a little bit of that weight off your back, because then you understand, what the situation is and how it happened, and then you move on from it. And because if you continue to just sit there and dwell on it, you're never going to move forward. You're always going to be stuck in that cesspool of just nastiness that you don't want to be in. So figure out what happened, own it, and move on. Simple.
Love that advice.
I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because in Dave's classes, he will talk about this. It's a video series for those of you who haven't been through Financial Peace University. It is one of those really funny things where he's like, look, if grandma taught you how to bake a cake, and you've been baking a cake for 20 years and it comes out chocolate every single time and you wonder why it's not vanilla, change the recipe. And he's like, part of it is you've been trying to do your own thing, your own plan for such a long period of time. Like maybe you need to listen to someone else's advice every now and again, and someone who's got a point-by-point plan. Like stop trying to do things your own way and maybe look at it, someone that has been there, done that, has perfected the system, because the messages are out there. And I think you're right. You've got to kind of look, it's a hard look in the mirror and say, look, I messed up with, zeros and commas, and all of a sudden, what am I going to do to now make this back, and how am I going to get back up and do that? And there's so many resources out there, and this is just one from a financial standpoint. So I think that's really cool. Tony, the last question I always ask my guests is this concept of Dear Younger Me. It's a song, it's a Christian song. And I love the context of it because it's, imagine yourself, you're writing a letter to yourself. You're older now, and I've dubbed it, it's the advice you wish you knew when you were 22. So whether you're coaching someone in their 20s, or maybe you're just thinking about some of those things that, golly, you know, like that school of hard knocks, what would you do a little bit differently? Or what's that advice you give to someone in their 20s if you're mentoring them?
Well, it goes back to what I'm saying, you know, just, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. The other thing is, you know, don't be afraid to take chances, you know, especially when you're younger. You can make some investments that somebody that's in their 60s I might say, I need you to plan for retirement. So don't go getting crazy with your investments. But when somebody's younger, say, I need you to invest into your future. So when you're my age, you don't ever have to work again. And I always put this thing together. And I tell them, I said, you know, how am I going to own 10 properties by the time I retire, free and clear, so you don't ever have to work a day in your life after that? Because remember, we don't have retirement plans as real estate brokers or agents or whatever. But the younger me telling the older me, hey, don't make that left turn on that street that one time, and don't do, you know, remember all that stuff. But it's more about align yourself with the people that are going to make you successful. One of the things that I tell these agents, especially when they're new, and I never understood it, was I don't understand why the new agent is always hanging out with the other new agent and they go together, they're always together. I'm like, why don't you hang out with the successful agent and follow him around so you can see what he's doing so that you can become that person? Because they all kind of congregate together. All the newbies hang out together and then they wonder why they're not successful. Why they're all, you know, and so the younger agents is, you know, don't be afraid to go out there and really work hard. And if you sacrifice now and really come into this and work hard, you'll reap the benefits of it later. And then you don't have to do that. You don't have to work on Saturdays and Sundays. You don't have to, you know, you can go on vacations and not worry about where your business is going to be or what's happening in your business or who's not going to be able to take care of your business or who's going to take care of your business, who's going to steal your business. You don't have to worry about those things.
It's so cool. It is so cool because I think so many, especially, you know, the ignorance, and I'm not trying to say this in any negative way, but when we're young, we're all ignorant, right? You don't know what you don't know, and you haven't lived enough life yet to really know and experience it. And some are more mature than others are in their 20s. But I would imagine most younger people are sitting out there. They're like, what did it take? Like, what was the one thing that you did that just made you successful? And it's not one thing. It's every Sunday of going to the swap meet. For me, it was every Sunday of prospecting buildings and doing the exact same thing you're talking about, where I'm walking block after block after block when most people are just hanging out watching a football game. I remember I would listen to the Broncos broadcast as I'm driving around or on my my Walkman or whatever the heck it was. It was like an AM radio that I had clipped to my belt, which is super funny to think about. But I would walk and I'd write addresses, and then I would go Monday and call those people because I did make cold calls. And it's like these little things add up to the big things. I've got a buddy who's been on this podcast before and runs a huge Keller Williams franchise in Washington, D.C. named Bo Mankitti, where Bo says that success is slow and then sudden. What happens is you're doing all these different things. And Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, calls it the flywheel. It takes a lot of effort to make that flywheel make one revolution, do one big turn. But then as the flywheel keeps going, you've got that momentum, and it becomes easier and easier and easier. And it's all these little things that you do that just add up. And I love the advice. I think it's awesome. Work hard, save your money, continue to be just hungry. Tony, this has been such a fun experience. I have learned far more from you in this past hour than I did in the 2 minutes where you're giving me tie selections in the men's room as I'm getting ready for the presentation.
Don't know your audience, right? But, I got a bone to pick with you, by the way. I'm a big Oakland Raider fan, man.
Oh. Well, we'll just have to agree to disagree. Both of our teams
what we're gonna do is we're gonna go watch a game together in Denver, and we'll have a good time, man.
I love it, yeah, because I'm not going to Oakland with Broncos stuff on. That's not gonna happen.
You'll be with me, man.
Vegas, anyways.
In Vegas is gonna be nice.
Well, if you love this podcast and you're out there listening or watching it on YouTube, you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts. You can consume it on YouTube. You can consume it on Spotify. We would appreciate a 5-star rating and a subscribe. That would be great. For Tony Ayon at Miramar International, I'm Kyle Malnati. And as we love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.